On Times Radio.
Now, councils in England which delay or block housing developments for no good reasons will be named and shamed under plans announced today by the Housing Secretary. At a speech in London, Michael Gove said the government would publish league tables revealing the performance of council planning authorities in approving developments.
I'm prepared to act wherever there's failure. I expect all other authorities to make sure that they have a timetable for an up-to-date plan in place within the same timeframe, with a copy provided to my department. I'm also acting today to deal with more planning authorities that have persistently underperformed in dealing with planning applications. I've already used the designation framework to step in when necessary to root out torpor, requiring an authority to produce an improvement plan and allowing developers to apply directly to the planning inspectorate for decision.
He said that in extreme cases, councils could be stripped of their planning powers. Well, earlier I spoke to Colin Slade, Conservative County Councillor in Tiverton and Vice Chair of the Council, and Jack Rowlett, political commentator and housing campaigner. And Colin said he was speaking in a personal capacity, and he talked me through the housing plans in his region.
It is very important to have a local plan. Certainly, in my time, we were looking at a considerable number of housing developments and also putting an emphasis on social housing and indeed innovative things like modular housing. Z-Pods, for example. I believe other brands are available. But
tell us what a Z-Pod is.
Well, it's a modular house. It comes off the back of a lorry. You put
like
it up,
a kit.
connect it. Yeah, exactly that. And you connect it up to the mains water and the mains electricity and the sewage. And it can be a single unit, which is fine for maybe one or two people, or you can bolt them together to go up to a 4-bedroomed house. So it's a very flexible form of housing and it's very cost effective. So certainly in this part of the world, we were sort of leading the charge there, as it were, in introducing those. They're currently being built. They've actually started the construction or indeed the installation of those. That's underway now. Also, social housing is an opportunity to go sustainable as well. And again, there are plans here for passive house construction where you can build carbon neutral houses and really, kill two birds with one stone, provide affordable social housing and protect the environment. But that you can only do that if you actually have a plan. And I think what Mr. Gove has outlined today is the importance of having that local plan. The authorities that he has named, and some would say shamed, haven't had a local plan since 2004.
Okay.
You have to do a local plan roughly every 5 years. You have to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. If you don't, then you lay yourself open to speculative planning applications, which is where you could get the wrong sort of housing in the wrong sort of place. So those authorities that actually do what they should do haven't got anything to worry about what's been said today. Those that are deliberately being, if you like, NIMBY and deliberately blocking applications, Mr. Gove said, for no good reason. And that's the whole point. If it is inappropriate, if it's in the wrong place, if it is building on grade 1 agricultural land when it doesn't need to, if it's harming the environment, then those councils have every right to refuse the planning application.
Well, let me bring in Jack now, because I would like to hear from him. You campaign for more affordable housing. What do you make of what Michael Gove has announced today, which is a plan to try to force local councils to come up with their own housing proposals, but then there are some areas of beautiful countryside that are protected?
Yeah, so I think, frankly, Michael Gove says we need to be calling out local authorities that aren't building enough housing, that aren't putting plans in place. I think really the government needs calling out on this too. Actually, this plan that they've announced today relaxes housing targets, which we know will result in fewer houses being built. Unless you have proper targets in place, no one in any part of the housing supply chain can actually plan to deliver the housing we need. As Colin's just emphasised there, the importance of having a plan in place. It allows local councils to set lower housing targets and allocate less land to development if development would have to mean building on the greenbelt, for example, or would affect the character of the local area. I think things as vague as that makes it really easy for NIMBY councils, if you like, to claim that what they're doing is okay. Essentially, what Michael Gove set out is, well, I'm going to send a very strongly worded letter to councils that don't build enough homes. But actually, it's pretty toothless. The government isn't putting in place the policy environment that's needed for us to build more homes. And a lot of these councils, I think there's something like 60 councils which have reduced the scale of house building that they're going to build, and that have made that decision over the past few months. And they've done that in response to the government's lack of a policy framework. They've done that in response to the government abolishing those mandatory top-down housing targets. So actually, this isn't a joined-up approach at all. On the one hand, Michael Gove is standing up and sort of claiming to be thrusting Britain out of the housing crisis. He's going to name and shame. He's going to introduce league tables. But when you dig into the detail, actually, this doesn't really do much to solve Britain's chronic shortage of housing.
But don't you have to have a balance here? Don't you have to have some protection for environmentally important landscapes? Don't you have to give local people a say in where houses are being built? I mean, isn't that your experience, Colin?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, all those factors come into play. Another thing to remember is that if a district council, LPA, local planning authority committee, decides to refuse an application, the applicant can appeal. That then goes to an appeal inspector, and if the appeal inspector overturns the refusal, that council will pay a penalty. And we're not talking a few quid, we're talking about probably £250,000. So they do have to have very good reasons for refusing an appeal. And if the appeal is not upheld, the applicant can then go for a judicial review. I actually know of these things happening right now, but I'm not going to be more specific about exactly where. But somebody is trying to build 150 houses in a place where they have been refused several times before because they're on very good agricultural land, because they're actually right on top of a conservation area and a countryside park. It's deemed inappropriate because next door to that site, there is already allocation and planning permission granted for another 1,200 or so homes. They will be built, but obviously it takes time to build houses. The Tiverton Eastern Urban Extension was first put into play about 2009 before I was on the council. Since then, it has grown. We now have several areas which are fully occupied, and the infrastructure is going in. A new road link has gone in, and houses are being built every day. But it will take a number of years before that development is complete. But
well, let me bring in Jack then, because you are clearly concerned that the way these proposals have been framed, which does give local people the chance to object if they feel that it is too out of keeping with the local character. You're clearly concerned that that will reduce the number of new homes that are being built. Michael Gove is saying what we'll do is give people an opportunity to protect that which is reasonable, but strip away all the unreasonable techniques that are used by councils to evade responsibility for building new homes. Jack?
Yeah, so I think there is some good stuff here. And I think if the government's approach was more coherent and it was making big steps forward in other areas, then the extra accountability for councils would be a good thing. I think it's really, really important to get straight, though, the fact that the green belt that Gove is so insistent on protecting does not cover all of our green spaces. It's only about 13% of the country, and huge swathes of it are currently containing, derelict buildings, disused petrol stations, car parks, places that are not environmentally beneficial land where we absolutely should be building on. And the approach taken by the government and espoused by Michael Gove is a sort of one-size-fits-all approach, really. And I think that's the really damaging thing. You can't have a one-size-fits-all approach to the Greenbelt. You have to be able to build on the bits that aren't environmentally beneficial and absolutely protect environmentally beneficial land where that's necessary too. I think the problem is where you define that kind of reasonable opposition, because what we've seen over the past few decades is we haven't built enough houses, and the more reasons you give to people to oppose houses, the more power you give to people to oppose houses, the more they will oppose them. And the consequences of that are dire for people who want to own homes, who want to get on in life, who want to have kids. We're something like 5 million short of the homes we need to meet demand. It's an absolute outrage. And we need bold, ambitious plans. We need reforms to planning. We need to build on the Greenbelt where it's appropriate. And yes, we need naming and shaming of councils too, but alone that just isn't enough.
And Colin, have you had to deal with local opposition to some of the developments that you've been involved with or that you've seen on your patch?
Yes, the ones that I've seen. I mean, there's one just up the road, about 3 miles from where I'm sitting right now, which was a contingency site in the Mid Devon local plan. An application came in, and 60 houses are now being built on a field on the edge of a village. That's good news for the people who need those homes, although I don't think there's a great deal of social housing there. It's more market housing. But there's no shortage of applications. There's no shortage of people who want to build houses in my area. And as I said, I repeat that councils have to think carefully before rejecting an application, because if it goes to appeal and they lose, they really do get penalised. So they have to think very carefully about those reasons. They have to have material planning reasons for refusing an application. And unfortunately for some, people objecting to it simply isn't good enough. The fact I don't like it, I don't want it, is not a material planning consideration. It's got to be considerably more, as we've heard some of the things that are outlined by Mr. Gove today: environmental damage, overdevelopment, not in keeping with the setting, and all those sort of actual material planning considerations. So, yeah, I understand entirely what Jack's saying, where he's coming from, and he's a campaigner. But from where I'm sitting, I'm seeing lots of houses being built in my area. I'm seeing lots of planning applications coming forward. Obviously, it is up to the district council to determine those applications, but hopefully they will continue in terms of investment in social housing and affordable housing, because those are the areas where we really do need to build, and build soon.
And Jack, we know that a lot of the new homes are going to be focused firstly around Cambridge and then in London. I mean, younger people trying to get onto the housing market do want to be able to live in the places where the jobs are, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is sort of London, Oxford, Cambridge, those types of places that are really constrained by the housing crisis at the moment. And if we actually see these homes being built in Cambridge, which I know is a big part of the plan that Gove's announced, I think that is absolutely fantastic, because you've already got huge amounts of investment in life sciences, biotech. You know, you've got Cambridge University there as well, which is a leading research university, of course. So it's absolutely fantastic if we do see those homes being built there. But we know there's plenty of opposition in the area, not least from Conservative MPs. And what we've seen over the past few years is that there are plans proposed to build more houses. Government makes a big song and dance about it. We've seen different approaches from different Conservative governments over the past few years. But then actually in the end, there's opposition from the backbenches, and the government caves, and nothing ends up happening. And I think what we really need is an approach where the government is willing to a certain extent just steamroller through opposition, because if they're not prepared to do that, if they're not prepared to stand up to their own backbenchers, we're not going to solve the housing crisis. And I would just echo as well the Colin's emphasis on social housing too, because I think that is hugely important. We've seen something like a 60% cut in funding for social housing since 2010, and at the moment where interest rates are higher, when mortgage rates are higher, the private sector house building is particularly exposed to that cycle. But we can really get house building up by building more social housing, because that's less exposed to that cycle, because it's more driven by the government. And I think the government and local councils in lots of parts of the UK really need to do more there as well.
Well, that was the housing campaigner Jack Rowlett talking to me earlier, along with Colin Slade, who is a Conservative county councillor in Tiverton.